Welcome to the Operate Intelligently podcast. I'm your host, Brian McDonald, Digital Marketing Manager at DeGroote Solutions. I'm excited to be your new host, and you'll still get to hear from Bob and Tony every once in a while. We'll be continuing to explore some of the topics that span all of our industries, as well as hone in on specific market challenges. And today we're diving into the world of education, and I have two special guests joining me to talk about our annual Education Operations Health Index, or OHI as we'll refer to it. Joining me today are Earl Lain, who is our Senior Education Marketing Manager. Earl, welcome.
Thanks for having me, Brian.
Thank you. And Jed DeGroote, Director of Client Services at DeGroote Solutions. Jed, welcome.
Thanks for having me here.
So, gentlemen, last year we launched the OHI to the education industry, and it was well received. And just a little bit of background information on what the OHI is. It's an index that was calculated using our database of almost 20 years of education operation statistics. I mean, billions of client data points are combined with the actual survey responses, and these survey responses came from all areas: public K through 12, 4 and 2 year universities, and private independent schools. So we got a full breadth of different areas of education. So this comprehensive index kind of identifies the most relevant trends. And basically, it's kind of the pulse of the education operation. So Earl, kind of why do we do all this?
Well, this really kind of started as a brainchild of our VP of Sales, Brian Carter, who had some exposure to some pieces like this across the manufacturing space. And obviously, we've got a vast knowledge and database on education operations, almost 20 years of experience, in fact. So with close to 7,000 clients, we really wanted to kind of create a keystone piece that people associate us with and look forward to each year, that really helps kind of keep a pulse on the state of education operations. It's something that when we say operations, we're not just historically thinking of maintenance and operations, but the full breadth of maintenance, preventive maintenance, deferred maintenance, and even we'll start to get into predictive maintenance and Internet of Things. We also think of operations as event-related, community use of facilities, energy consumption within educational institutions, technology, how IT teams are operating, and even safety to a degree. But it makes this piece super relevant to whether you're a director of operations or more of a C-level title within an educational institution. And in summary, it's really meant to just track how operations department change their workflows, habits, and priorities over year to year, as well as how sentiment data towards operations kind of ebb and flow over the course of each year, like I mentioned.
Great. So one of the first areas that we look at in this study is the corrective, preventive, and deferred maintenance, which is kind of the core of what we do and what our clients do. This year we actually saw that less than half of the respondents are doing more preventive maintenance than last year. But we still see the PM to reactive maintenance ratio around 19%, which is below the recommended benchmark. So, Jed, why are we seeing only less than half of our clients doing PM, but still falling far behind the benchmark?
That's a good question. I think it's kind of reflective of where many clients or educational institutions are at right now with their maintenance and how they handle their operations. The recommended benchmark has traditionally been around 30% of your PM resources going towards preventative maintenance activities. The most progressive or well along, our campus champions are doing more than 50% of their work as PM. So that's really what you want to shoot for. But unfortunately, the fact is, many institutions are still in kind of a run to failure mode with their PM program and doing minimal activities. A lot of times we kind of see it's either feast or famine. Either they're doing a really good job at it because they started it a few years ago and built it up, or they just haven't been able to get over that hump of starting their PM program yet. Everybody understands, there's a significant ROI when you start to implement a PM program, right? I mean, we've talked about that a lot earlier, you and I have. There's a lot of overtime decrease once you start doing that preventative maintenance. It increases energy efficiency on your assets, extends life cycles of roofs, so your major assets in your system like boilers and your rooftop units. Along with just creating a better learning environment for the children. That's something that's not necessarily captured in the financials, but it's something that we hear time and time again from our campus champions as well. So we all know the ROI, but unfortunately the reality is it does take some resources to get over that hump. It's not as easy as just flipping a switch and start doing PM. You can start doing some minimal activities at first, but and there are benefits as soon as you do start doing PMs. I think of a client a few years ago, Earl, you probably remember this anecdote too, was from a university that when they started to implement a PM program, well, first let me back up. They said every summer they'd have drive shafts fail on their rooftop units. Every single summer, without fail, that would happen. The year after they implemented a PM program, they just started having people go up and check, those units. That summer they didn't have any drive shafts fail. Not coincidence, right? So there are payoffs immediately, but the resources that it took to do that PM program, it went up a slight uptick at first, and then it starts to level out, and then they really start to see the ROI in year 2 and 3. So I think the reason why we still see clients that are below that benchmark is because it does require resources, and they're strapped for resources typically. So it takes strong leadership, at the maintenance director level, at the business office level, to understand what it takes to get a PM program up and going. I think it is important to note that we have seen the trend is on the rise of clients that are doing, or educational institutions in general, doing more preventative maintenance, and so that's a positive. There's lots of cool strategies that people are implementing now to do some great things with preventative maintenance. I think one of the coolest things I've heard in the last year or two was one institution is using drones to start inspecting their rooftops and everything, so they're saving man hours of sending out people out on every single roof. They sent somebody, they invested in some classes to get them certified in flying those drones and checking the rooftops, and now they just send people up on the roof for the ones that really need attention and everything. So it's not necessarily where we want it to be, where everybody should be close to that benchmark, but it is improving, and there's some clients doing some really cool, innovative things with technology to try to get there.
Yeah, I think it's good that you mentioned leadership, because I think that is an important component in anything like preventive maintenance, where you have to say, we're going to make it a priority. Sometimes it's tough because other things might get pushed aside, but it's a smart investment.
No, that's exactly right. Yeah, we see that, and we see it at roundtables and when we talk to prospects and clients at events and everything, but leadership is definitely a key component to that. And you hit the nail on the head. Some things are going to have to get pushed back in the short term to dedicate on PM, but it pays dividends, in the long term.
I think another thing to point out there too is, even though we saw a slight drop off from last year, that's not necessarily a bad thing. If you look at our data, you can kind of see that maybe we're reaching a point of stabilization where those rock stars, our campus champions who are doing an incredible amount of PM work, can only do so much more the next year, right? So this is a sentiment survey, and when you look at the survey, if there are rock stars out there that are doing a tremendous amount of preventative maintenance, it's hard for them to maybe look at the responses and say, oh, I am doing more than I was last year. So we think that stabilization has a little bit to do with that response rate as well. And the drop-off's not necessarily a bad thing, because that 43% is still doing more, and that's a positive trend in that direction.
Are you looking for a way to get inspired about your work as a facility or operations professional? Join us at our annual Maintenance and Operations Conference, DeGroote University in Raleigh, North Carolina, May 5th through 8th, 2019. You'll be able to attend educational sessions about your day-to-day work, meet professionals from across the country that work in your and other industries, and enjoy food, friends, and fun in the DeGroote's hometown. If you register this year, you can take advantage of our all-inclusive DeGroote deal. Learn more and register online at university2019.com.
So let's talk a little bit about deferred maintenance. And this is the real big scary monster hiding in the closet. It's the backlog, it's things that we have to deal with, and maybe we've pushed aside. But overdue maintenance has risen about 18% over the past 6 years. How are schools dealing with the challenge?
Yeah, let me walk it back just a little bit too. When I was looking at this overall, the Operations Health Index, this was one thing that kind of stood out a little bit. I guess I wouldn't call it surprising, but the overall sentiment was up from last year in the health index from 55.6 to 57.2. So overall, people are feeling better about how they're handling their operations, but this was one of the sore spots, as you talked about, Brian. The sentiment for deferred maintenance was one of the more pessimistic areas. Most respondents didn't feel like they have the resources to take on capital upgrades or improvements. And with this, the infrastructure out there for educational institutions, they're aging. They're old, 50 years on average, I think, for a public K-12 facility. 45 years even for higher education as the average age. So they're aging and systems are failing. Buildings have a finite life cycle, and not a lot of people, if they're outside facilities, think about that. And so particularly, in the business office, it might be where it's not at top of mind that these facilities and their assets do kind of cycle through. And I think about it, just at home, if you have a home and you own it for 10 years, I know that's a little bit rare now compared to past, but carpets have to be replaced, roofs have to be replaced, HVAC systems have to be replaced. Well, think of a facility with 1,000 students in there. The same kind of thing happens. So, how are they dealing with it? I think, the best ones, what we see, they're doing a lot around education, educating their stakeholders, whether that's within the school or within their community. Transparency, showing, what is out there. Not trying to hide things or shove them under the rug. Let's be open and transparent about what needs to be repaired. And communication, those are the common elements that I see for our most successful leaders in operations. Another strategy that we're seeing more of is when there's new construction that's happening, making sure that there's a PM program that's part of that new construction plan. So in the past, new construction would take place. That once that was done, it was kind of tossed over to maintenance and operations to take care of without a lot of thought or resources dedicated to a PM program. But now that's part of the whole planning and building and construction process in a lot of areas where they're doing that now. So that's another strategy. If you're implementing that PM program, then your deferred maintenance is going to stay low. And it's better to knock that out than to let it build up. Once it does, then you've got a whole other challenge to tackle.
And Earl, I was going to ask you, can you talk a little bit about the difference of how DM is seen between, say, K through 12 and higher ed, the value of the importance on it?
Absolutely, and Jed, feel free to jump in here and kind of add to what I'm going to say. But I think from K-12, it's one of the core aspects that's looked at is financially. I mean, obviously, if you look in the Operations Health Index, we quoted the State of Our Schools report, which just had a ton of fantastic data around deferred maintenance. And so there's really some very real financial implications on the K-12 side. I don't want to go into all those data points because I'd just be throwing a lot of numbers out here at you right now, but highly encourage everybody to go take a look at that. It's very eye-opening to see the hole that we're in as a nation regarding deferred maintenance. Some pretty powerful statistics in there. So again, to summarize, K-12, there's certainly a financial impact as well. I think when you look at higher education and even private independent schools to a certain degree as well, there's certainly a financial implication there as well, but there's also the component of appearance and student recruitment. And to be quite frank with you, those also apply equally to K-12 schools as well. I mean, there are families, being a new dad, I know that you want to move to an area with good schools, and so appearance is everything. But there's certainly an added component with higher ed of appearance and student recruitment that when kids come to your campus and they tour and they look at your schools, they want to be in a place that's well maintained. They want to be in an environment that is conducive for them to learn effectively within. And really, there's a lot of power in that. When kids step on your campus, that's the first impression that's often made upon them, as your facilities, as the campus itself. And I mean, we're lucky to have a lot of really great, beautiful campuses in the state of North Carolina, and I know that played a key factor in where I attended school. Is you walk on campus and you see how well maintained these facilities are, and that's a big part of your choice. So to a certain degree, probably plays a larger factor in higher education and even those private and independent schools, but definitely something that's also relevant in K-12 as well.
Yeah, Earl, when I was kind of thinking about that question as you're going through, I think you hit on something good there. It is relevant to both, but higher ed and private K through 12 definitely are a little more concerned with curb appeal and student recruitment, as you said. I think also, they take, typically in my experience in working with them, they take a more programmatic approach to planning. So it's something that they do on a consistent, regular basis. It's not necessarily that they don't face the same challenges as public K through 12. They do. They have an aging infrastructure. They have finite resources with infinite, seemingly infinite kind of things that they have to repair and everything. But because they take a programmatic approach to it and everything and can articulate what needs to be done, it seems like the deferred maintenance issue isn't as magnified necessarily at higher ed and private institutions. It's acknowledged, even if it can't be all addressed right away. At least that's what we see. K through 12, they're competing with curriculum for knowledge. That's just the simple thing. And we understand the value of that too. We know that. So, and unfortunately, as we talked about earlier with preventive maintenance, public K through 12, often, unfortunately, we hear that they're running to failure on their building components. So, and their facilities are slightly older. If you look at the average age and everything. So that's just some of the other differences that I see between higher ed and public K-12.
I would agree with both of you, and as a parent of a high schooler who's starting to take her on college visits, I think it's not only the students, it's the parents, it's stakeholders, it's donors, it's all people that when they bring someone onto their campus, they want it to look good, they want it to be shining as much as they can.
Absolutely.
I want to thank Earl and Jed for joining me today, and thank you for listening. If you want to get your copy of the Operations Health Index, as well as the infographic, we'll have those available in the show notes, as well as on our website, dudesolutions.com. In the next episode, we'll continue our discussion on the 2018 Operations Health Index, so tune in for the second half.
Thank you for listening to the Operate Intelligently podcast. Subscribe to us wherever you get your podcasts, leave us a review, and you can even email us at dspodcast@dudesolutions.com.